Hello to all my students and anybody else who might be watching this. I am about to continue reading this novel by Leslie Connor, Waiting for Normal. And guess what? We're still waiting for normal. It hasn't arrived yet. The last couple of chapters that we read were chapters 40. We ended on 45, so we read all the way up through 45. I think it was 43 through 45, maybe. And so the title of chapter 45 was Something Familiar. Um, and if you remember, Helena and her mom had driven up to Grandiose Farm and brought Addie some sort of hand-me-down clothes because remember the fire in the trailer destroyed everything that Addie owned. And the only outfit that Addie had was this little outfit that Mrs. Casey, who was the caseworker for Addie, she had brought her a little outfit. So I think Addie was very thankful to get an outfit from her friend Helena and have a little visit from her. But the chapter ended with a request from Addie to Grandio. Does anybody remember what that request was? I can't hear you, so I don't know if you got it right. But Addie's request to Grandio was to get Piccolo from Sula so that Piccolo could come and live at the farm with Addie. I think Addie really misses her pet hamster. And so that's the request. And I think do you remember how Grandio responded? Well, here's how Addie worded it. Piccolo isn't used to that. She won't bother me at night. We shared a bunk in the trailer. She needs something familiar. Addie thinks Piccolo needs something familiar, but it's probably more Addie needing something familiar if you ask me. She needs me. Grandio let a few seconds grind by. Grind by, that's an interesting word choice. I think he's kind of like fighting himself and letting her. He knows it's the right thing to do, but Grandy is, kind of gruff, and maybe he really truly doesn't want a hamster to wake him up at night, but he loves Addie, and he knows that this would be a good thing for her. So he says, Saturday then, we'll pick her up. I let my breath go. So now we are about to start chapter 46, which is entitled The Going Away Note. There we are, the going away note. All right, so let's see what happens here. Hiya, Elliot. I made a grand entrance at the mini-mart, like a celebrity returning to her stage. I'm back for Piccolo. Grandio's running errands and says I've got 45 minutes to visit. Where's Sula? Elliot's face was hanging sort of plain and expressionless. He gave me a weak smile and whispered, We lost her, Addie. I leaned forward. We lost Piccolo? No, we lost Sula. What? Elliot? You're joking, right? I spoke slowly. Like, how could anyone lose something as big as Sula? No, kiddo, I'm sorry. I mean, she died. It must have been me who screamed. I felt it in my throat. I rushed to the greenhouse. Sure, I'd find her there in the papasan chair, shaking out a chuckle the way she did. All I found was the chair, empty like a nest. All her things, all Sula's bright, crazy, colorful scarves and big dresses hung still in the open closet. Her nail polish bottles, her hot pinks and cherry reds, stood like little toys on the vanity. Elliot had come in behind me. He gave me a hug when I turned around. Was it because of me? Was it the fire? I asked. Did that kill her? Did that day kill her? No, no, no. She was just so sick, he said. Oh, Elliot, I can't believe it. I thought I'd come back and give her this humongous hug and... I know, he said. Addie, you should just let it out. The waterworks, I mean. You'll feel much better. Boy, that was all I needed to burst the dam. Elliot opened me up a mini pack of tissues. Here you go. He handed them to me. I've gone through at least 10 of these myself, and I'm not done yet. She left a big empty spot in this poor heart. He thumped his chest. I think I cried for everything that day, for Sula, for the fire, and for how much Elliot hurt. I cried for being mean to Dwight and for not being with him and my little sisters. I cried for Mommers and for not knowing what would happen to us all. Later, Elliot poured me a hot chocolate and brought Piccolo over to me. I sat on a milk crate with the cage between my feet. Elliot sat on Sula's old busted-down lawn chair. We sat looking out across the street at the empty black patch where the trailer had stood. I could see the grassy slope that led up to the train. It was greening up with springtime, almost like it was repairing itself. What happened to 7 down and 1 to go? I asked him. She never had the last one. To tell you the truth, I think the battle was over a while ago, but none of us wanted to say so. I blew my nose and went for another tissue. Do you think it was those brown fields, Elliot? Is that how Sula got the cancer? Do you think it was the gasoline tanks? We'll never know, he said, shaking his head. No one can be sure. There are mysteries in life, kiddo, and some of them just plain stink. But you should know that when it came time, she really needed to go. She wanted to go. Oh, and she left you something. He bounced up, went to the cash register, and pulled a fat envelope out of the drawer and handed it to me. I hesitated. Should I open it now? Sure. The bulk of it was money, a lot of green bills. I could just about see Sula's hands, her hot pink nails slipping bills into that envelope. It made me dizzy to think about it. I didn't count the money. I was interested in a handwritten letter that was wrapped around it. I unfolded it. Now, this is what the letter looks like on the page. It's in italics. If you can see that very well. And it's written to Cookie. Remember, that was the nickname that Sula gave to Addie. Dear Cookie, I've got a few regrets as I float out of here, but I sure am kicking myself for never asking you to play your flute for me. I always thought there'd be time for Addie Schmieder's Mini Mart debut. Then suddenly your flute was gone. I'm guessing there's a good reason for that. This isn't enough cashola for an expensive new instrument, but maybe there's a second-hander out here, or even something else out there, or even something else that'll help you get your dreams back in order. You decide. Last thing, Cookie, if I made mistakes when it came to you and your well-being, I'm sorry. This heroism business doesn't come with instructions. We can only follow our instincts. I'm glad to have been one of your heroes, and glad that you were here on the corner being one of mine. Keep crossing bridges and poking your nose behind gates, little Cookie. It's a big, big world. Love, Sula. Wow, I whispered. She writes a great going-away note. Yes, she does, Elliot said. Then he laughed. Listen to us. She's got us talking about her in the present tense. For a moment, I did feel like Sula was still there. Elliot promised to take me around to the music stores. I think there's $300 there, he gestured toward the envelope in my hand. And nobody drives a harder bargain than yours truly. There's a flute in your future, kiddo, if that's what you want. I lifted Piccolo out of her cage and let her tunnel up the sleeve of my sweatshirt. She turned around at my elbow and came back into my hand. It felt good to hold her tiny, vibrating body, good to see her take up some space. She looked up at me and blinked. I remembered Sula winking with her amazing lined eyes. I guess in reflection of everything that we learned about Sula and how she had been battling cancer pretty much the whole book, there was definitely some foreshadowing about her dying, but I don't think it's easy to accept that that's what has happened. I think Sula definitely was a hero for Addie and has even left her this gift so that she can get her own flute and not have to worry about borrowing or taking a flute from school and not getting it back in time and so forth. So I think that Sula definitely made a lasting impact on Addie and Elliot. All right. The next chapter, chapter 47, is entitled Defining Normal. And as we've talked about, I think normal is something that I don't know if we ever arrive at. Normal is kind of a vague concept, and it's redefined if it even exists all the time. I think that, when we were in school and we were trying to figure out, what it was that Addie was looking for in this book and, waiting for normal, I think that we all thought she wanted a family structure, that was like a mom and a dad and some sisters. And she never really got that. Her family was always twisting and turning. And so we thought we knew what normal was. And now, in our own lives, we're going through this pandemic. And so we're all looking for kind of a new normal. So I don't know that we ever completely arrive at normal. I think we arrive at, um, getting used to new circumstances, and we're always changing. And so there's something really valuable about thinking about Addie's situation. And now she's looking at defining normal. Let's see what this chapter is about. Grandio didn't have much time for a sad story. Grandio is kind of gruff and to the point, I think. He dished me up a double bowl of ice cream when we got home, but he didn't give me any pep talks about loss and death and dying. I didn't really blame him. Some things are too hard to talk about. He was nice about Piccolo moving in. He let me take her upstairs. I kept very close track of Pic. I couldn't stand the idea of losing anything else. Grandio took feeding me very seriously. He said that was part of his job as my agency-appointed guardian. But he always made long, heavy sighing sounds as he worked in the kitchen. I offered to cook, but he wouldn't allow that. If I did anything more than set the table, he stopped me, saying, "No, no, you sit down, girl. I'll get the supper out. I'll get it." His food was good, but every once in a while I craved one of my own toast dinners. Grandio made me a paper bag lunch every day, and every day he slathered the bread with mustard and slapped 2 pieces of bologna inside. I didn't like mustard. I tried to tell him, but I guess Grandio thought that mustard went with bologna, and that was that. Still, it was nice to find the lunch on the bench by the door every day as I headed out for the school bus, and something to count on. After a while, I got used to mustard. But I did not get used to the things Grandio had to say about mommers. So I think that even beyond, or even in spite of everything that Addie has endured because of her mom, or um, since her mom didn't really come home, I think that Addie loves her mother very deeply and is concerned about her and wants her to be treated well and not to be disrespected. And I think it bothers Addie when Grandio badmouths mommers. He would suddenly bring up bits about the old abandonment charges. Then he let it drop that the new charges were called child endangerment. "How in the heck does somebody forget to come home and take care of her own babies?" he'd say. Then he'd add something like, "I got a yard full of idiot birds, chickens, that know better than that." He'd shake his head. "Call it endangerment or anything else you want. That woman's a criminal." Criminal. Written in italics, so I think Addie's thinking that word. I swallowed hard. I don't think she sees her mother as a criminal, like Grandio does. I don't know what I expected as far as mommers was concerned, but I am sure that I didn't expect to see the blue car come rumbling up to Grandio's on the picnic. I just totally skipped along. But I am sure that I didn't expect to see the blue car come rumbling up to Grandio's farm. But one day in April it did. Notice it's April in the book and how we have kind of followed along in the school year. It was it was Halloween, and then it was Thanksgiving, and then it was Christmas, and so we've kind of followed, and now we're caught up. It's April here, and it's April in the book. So one day in April, that blue car came rumbling up to Grandio's farm. I was standing on the picnic table, filling the bird feeder that hung from the apple tree out in front of Grandio's house. Mommers got out of her car, but she left the door open like she wouldn't be staying long. She looked at me as if it had been 2 years instead of 5 weeks since she'd seen me. "Addie, baby," she said hoarsely. "Addie, can you believe all this?" She pushed her hand into her stringy hair and held it in a claw-like grip. Her sweater fell open, and I could just make out the lump of the baby at her belly. We were so close this time. If I'd just had a little more time to make the business work. She stopped and shook her head. I had no idea what to say to Mommers. Finally, I offered that I was sorry about the fire. The bird feeder squeaked as it swayed on the tree branch over my head, and I remembered how the train used to rock the trailer. No, don't be sorry about that old piece of junk, she said. She began to cry. I'm sorry I was gone so. Out! Grandio boomed. He stood on the front step, one arm raised straight as a stick, pointing down the driveway. He held the phone in his other hand. You're violating the order, Denise. One call. That's all I gotta make. Jack, don't. How can you? She stopped and took a step toward him. She took a hard swallow and said, I just want 5 minutes with my little girl. Little girl. Grandio shook his head. Not while I'm standing here. Please, Jack, don't do this. 5 minutes, please. She held up her hand, fingers spread wide. Grandio, I said, couldn't she just stay a minute? I know it's against all the decisions, but isn't anybody going to ask me what I want? He finally nodded and stepped back into the doorway. Mommers kept making little noises in her throat. She fussed with her hair and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. So, how's Pete? I asked. She raised her eyebrows. Pete is, well, I wonder what she's going to say. He's pretty flippin' surprised. Then he knows about the baby? I glanced at her belly. Yeah, he does now. He's going to try to help me, believe it or not. I believe it, I said. It's his kid. Mommers nodded. Pete and I have a lot to get past, and we're just getting started. God, it's such a mess. They're going to make me take parenting lessons. They think I won't know how to take care of the baby when he gets here. It's a boy? She nodded and pulled a ratty tissue from her pocket. Well, Pete can help, right? I think so. Mommers nodded again and blotted her eyes. I spent a second imagining, hoping that Pete, whoever he was, would be a really good dad like Dwight. What about you, Addie? How are you? I shrugged. Grandio takes good care of me. I look fine, don't I? Mommers laughed and tears rolled down her cheeks. Yeah, you do look fine. Have you seen my Brenna and my Katie? Yes, they come often. Everyone was here for Easter, I said. Brenna went home with purple sleeves from the egg dye. Katie wouldn't bite the ears off her chocolate bunny because she said he wouldn't be able to hear without them. Oh, I miss them so much. Mommer started to cry again. I know, me too, I said. I wished I'd had fresh tissues from Mommer's. She still had lots of crying to do, and I knew how that felt. Did you hear about Sula? I asked. Oh, yes. And I was so sorry, Mommer said. Must have been awful. I miss her, I whispered. She was really good to me. Yes, she was. Mommers nodded. She cleared her throat. Addie, you said nobody asks what you want. Do you know what you want? I just want normal, I said. What's normal? Mommers squinted at me. Things are always changing. I mean, how does anyone know if they've got normal? I thought for a second. I've felt close to it before. I said, normal is when you know what's going to happen next. Not exactly what, because probably nobody gets that. But normal is being able to count on certain things, good things, and it's having everyone together just because they belong that way. I realized I was making a circle with my hands as if I were holding on to a tiny world. I keep waiting for it to happen to us. I said, looking up at Mommers, but we never seem to get all the way to normal. Mommers looked back at me blankly. Time's up, Grandiose shouted from the doorway. Mommers got into her car quickly. Before she shut the door, she said, well, we'll get it someday, Addie. We'll get normal. I know she meant that with all her heart, but as I watched the blue car bump away down Grandio's long driveway, I didn't hold much hope. All or nothing never added up to normal. Now there's a break in the page here, and then it says, Grandio launched a big, long rant about Mommers that rose and fell all that afternoon and throughout meatloaf dinner. I could have made that call, I tell you. He filled one cheek with potatoes. One hot second, and I would have reported her. Taught her to respect the laws that... Stop! My own shout rang back at me. I can't stand it if you keep going on about her. I can't. I burned with tears and silence for the next few seconds. I expected him to shout back at me, but he didn't. He finally ducked his head and mumbled, You're right, girl. That's it. I'm done with it now. Somehow I knew he meant it. Wow. Okay, so we're going to stop here for today. And just looking ahead, there's chapter 48 and 49, and that is it. So we only have 2 more chapters to go. 48 is entitled Full of Surprises. So I guess our next video might be our last video for Waiting for Normal. So I'll leave you in suspense just a little bit longer. Think about what Full of Surprises might be about. And I'll give you the first line. It says, all through the month of May, I got visits. Maybe I should wait until May to post these last 2 chapters. That way we'd still be on track. I'll think about that. That's about, today is April the 15th, so that would give us 2 weeks. I don't know if I can wait that long to share this with you. Anyways, send me messages about the book, ask questions, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.